run over the top of that. So I would be happy to walk any of you guys through that or show you the type of things that I've done. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think, let's see, that's pretty much it. Yeah, questions?
So I have to tell you, this sounds more like Waterfall than Agile to me.
Yeah.
When you say multifunction team where each member looks at a different board, it sounds weird to me.
Yeah.
You use the term multifunction teams. Do they
Cross-functional.
Cross-functional teams. Do they work that way?
Yeah, so this is a great question. Because in my mind, right, true Agile, if I'm understanding you right, everybody just kind of gets around a story and they all just kind of work on it, right, at once, and it gets through there. What I found is that process can be broken up a little bit where those teams are kind of in more that grooming. You focus more on these things during grooming so that you have a designer, they need to do a ton of design, they need to test their designs, and so that generally would always require a lot of lead time up into a developer actually developing it. But there's review that happens and grooming that happens constantly before the code is actually written. So in one sense, yes, it is a bit more of like kind of step-by-step through, but we're focusing on like as small of slices as possible, right? A small, tiny functionality that's kind of working through the flow. Yeah, I don't know if that helps.
I felt the same thing. I think the Keith was saying.
Yeah.
You know, like when we use words like then when the developers are done, they hand it over to the testers. It's like
that's what I do.
It's kind of like, okay, the story now needs to be tested.
Yeah, I did briefly.
Send back to designer.
Yeah, and I think that that's really good.
I know it's hard because there's paradigms that companies have. And another thing is when we think about instead of stories going through all these phases, that the story is basically inheriting whatever tasks are being done under it, possibly. You know, where you'd have a design task and everything.
Well, that's certainly what it sounds like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think what we found in a lot of that was, at least what I found, was I wanted the designer and the developer to work like as closely as possible, right? But there's a lot of times where I think that just didn't work, or it didn't happen in real life. Mm-hmm. And so that was one thing that was like, it kind of upped the accountability a little bit from a, maybe maybe somebody's out of the office or whatever, but until that happens, it was almost like a checklist in a way, right? Like, okay, I need to make sure that I've got this thing reviewed. But yeah, in our org, we do have another kind of testing. Right now, there's like a testing flow, and we're transitioning from more waterfall to like more agile, and so I'd like to see this type of stuff like more pairing up on things, right? QA pairing up with developers and like doing more of that real time. But yeah, this kind of, it's almost like a checklist in a way, right? You're kind of moving through and making sure that you've gone through everything.
Yeah, one paradigm is the follow the baton, not the runner.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as far as pulling tasks, pull model where somebody needs a bucket to pull from. If testers have one of the particular items in the design flow, it falls into their bucket, and then testers are the ones that are pulling from that and making sure that queue gets cleared off and ready for the next stage. So I can see how Agile or Kanban particularly could take this. Do you have a board that's it's a combination of these?
Yeah, I do. I have actually a couple. So I have one that does pretty much every single, and that thing's massive. It covers like multiple monitors sometimes. And then I have like a roll up, so you can include multiple statuses in here. So like you could have just a
in progress.
Yeah, and then have it all rolled up. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, and a lot of this stuff I'm still trying out and like messing around with. So.
Joel Werdell.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And now for our last not least, Brian.
Mark, we're good?
Good. I'm enjoying these. Particularly since some of the topics in this deck have been referenced by the previous three speakers. I really appreciate that because it shows consistency on some of the where we're going with QA overall. So a little bit about myself, almost 20 years in software delivery. I'm currently at Avanade as a group manager for their cloud services delivery. Can't tell you on a secret project we're working on, but it's very cool. What this topic is about is observations, actually before starting the job, which I just started with you on Monday, about great ideas, really great concepts, architecture that go wrong. And a lot of that is stemmed from misconception or bad communication about the capability of the final solution. So I'm going to talk about that. And I believe, the premise I'm going to start with here is I think QA plays a key role, now more than ever, in terms of what we can offer as an influencer. So I want to talk through that a little bit. So why I think this is appropriate for, that you guys will pick up on this. And let me say this. I've never given this talk before. This is not something that's cued. I developed it for this because it's some ideas that were rattling around and what better venue to share it with. I also hope that a lot of what I'm going to talk about, your groups, your teams, your organizations are doing, my hope is that you'll find a few in here that'll be thought triggers to go, yeah, but maybe that would help continuously improve, right? That's part of the context. So I'm looking forward to feedback about that. So a lot of this focuses on cloud. Forrester says 2/3 of everyone in this room right now is at some point involved in that delivery. There's a very high likelihood that your organization is in some way, shape, or form using private or public cloud in its delivery, either as an infrastructure or as part of your delivery. So, cloud, we're done with it being in its infancy. It's like, is it going to stick around? What is it? We know it's here to stay. But there's still key elements of delivery of this platform or service or infrastructure, whatever flavor that is, that need refinement. And I think it's very key, like I said earlier, QA has a role to play here. So let's talk about what the problem is. The problem is, I think, stems from this term economies of scale. A lot of people, it's basic microeconomics, where you say, okay, if I have a repetitive service or process or context, whether it's manufacturing or technology, and I can accelerate the volume I'm delivering that, then I should be able to save costs, right? The more I add it, the more I do this, the cost per unit decreases. That's a true concept, but I think a lot of times businesses and product owners, infrastructure and exec leadership teams take this out of context, especially in what I've seen with cloud and high, avant-garde, cutting-edge solutions, right? So here's a couple examples. I saw an implementation from a CRM system, and they were doing messaging to customers. Could be from multiple different channels, right? So the infrastructure leadership team decided to then carry that messaging over to operational messaging. Operational messaging is different in the context that now you have regulatory requirements, you have a higher degree of service level, higher volume, and the distribution and localization all become a factor in that. So they took let's do this in higher volume by plugging this into our infrastructure, and it became incredibly complex to the point where they couldn't sustain it. So that's one example I've seen where that happens. And we'll talk about a little bit about maybe how to prevent it from getting there. Here's another one. You've got a network device, and it's a pay monthly service, for whatever connectivity. It's probably, internet access, and they decided, okay, let's take this internationally. Using the same engine, we can then basically expand our channels, get distro partners set up to distribute this, and we'll just use the same engine, right? Well, they didn't consider the service level of PayPal or some of the other payment providers. The two-factor authentication that's built into that, slowing down, the processing and turnaround and all of that. So those little things, those one little hitches, flatline the whole business justification of going that way in the first place, right? Now, I'm not saying this happens every time, but it happens often enough where I think QA can play a role in preventing that. Cloud solutions are often presented from a consumer-based perspective. You talk to any, group in suits that comes in and talks to the exec team, and often they'll say, you know what, we can do this without involving your IT department. It's part of the sales pitch. I've been part of hearing that. It's still occurring today. It's not like I'm talking about something happening 2 or 3 years ago. That's still part of a lot of the packaging for these solutions. In some cases, that may be true. What I'm going to talk about is how to prevent those from going rogue in your environment. So, security, privacy, compliance, data ownership, availability in shared environments, data retention and access regulation, legal risk, corporate policies, the list goes on and on. Lack of functionality available in software as a service application. In some cases, I've seen vendors come in and there's so many differentiation parts, usually because of an agile process that they're all working on their backlog items, that I've seen an implementation up to production take 4 weeks or longer because of the complexity that they've built in taking care of the fringe scenarios. So it continues. There's the challenges. Private cloud, public cloud, they are separate for a reason. There's different levels of security performance expected within that. So let's talk about solutions here. Again, I said that already. There's an opportunity for QA to add value in a meaningful and appropriate way. Let's go through the list here. Architecture. I ran into this when I was in Washington Dental Service, where they actually said, Brian, we want you to test architecture of part of your delivery. And at first I was like, you've got to be kidding me, really? But as I've dug into that further, and even now, I think that is a very high bar and a very meaningful perspective. For instance, what about evaluating the batch duration of your solutions in the production environment and whether it's going to hit that threshold? Look at the authentication routes. Make sure all of them are within compliance with your corporate policies. Things like that. Even the data footprints. What platform is going to be supported with what kind of data types? Make sure you're in agreement with the architectural owners of the environments, because a lot of times the cloud solutions will either have to radically adjust what they're offering you to account for that, or they just don't support it and they're going to recommend a third party anyways. This one's tough, but I'm going to state it because I've seen it happen. Try not to bottleneck yourself into a single software as a service provider. And see that word, make sure test coverage and sustainability are part of the gap analysis when considering a cloud service or solution. That was covered a little bit earlier with Kevin, Make sure your stuff is testable before you start implementing it. Ensure production owners understand what they're signing up for. Too often, I see that the development group or the vendors themselves are tasked all the way through the production and many months afterwards because the legacy or in-house production support teams aren't ready to ramp up and support that. So all of a sudden, now you've created a gap, a conflict, where the people that need to sustain and improve on the software now have to be long-term, in some cases, supporting the very production that you're implementing, which becomes costly, which kills the whole ROI that you went after to begin with. Things to keep in mind. Develop and enhance security as part of QA and test coverage. Security is now tied in the cloud space for efficiency and performance as the primary focus for testing. So I'm not implying in any way that you guys aren't doing security testing at some level. What I'm saying here is raise the bar, raise it high, because that is one of the #1 areas that people are starting to invade. We're talking about device testing here. I ran into a situation with a mobile vendor where they've opened up their API for applications, right? They're encouraging people to submit applications to be vetted for use on their mobile network, right? Well, spammers and hackers now have found a way to do multiple sets, groupings of applications, each one with a specific function, so that no one in particular carries the virus payload, but they are now designed to talk to each other to create an end result that they're going after. I kid you not, I ran into this 3 weeks ago in an analysis. That's what's happening today. It's at great lengths.
A multi-app.
It's a multi-pack, multi-app. Each one's authenticated with its own token, and in and of itself, it doesn't pick up on the trigger until they aggregate and share data with each other.
Wow.
Microsoft Office.
So, as an
Fundamental
example,
to it.
put it high on the radar, guys, because it's up there. Do proactive performance testing, and this is what I mean by that. A lot of times the QA group can add value by demonstrating capability in the non-production and even working with the production owners saying, well, this is what you want to try, let's make sure we get accurate numbers on what this service or this likelihood using one of those test tools you talked about would operate in production. And we found that at a couple mobile telco providers I worked for, that in reality, the service and the data sharing that they were talking about actually wouldn't translate to the service levels that they thought they'd achieve if they deployed it into production without making some key changes. Instead of waiting till the very end where things are deemed done, right, in the process to get to that point to make that conclusion, find ways to assess that early and bring that feedback loop back into the conversation with architecture requirements, especially with hybrid cloud solutions. Because one size fits all test methodology is no longer effective. Hybrid cloud can mask often, and what I mean by that is a mix of private and public cloud, the limitations of the private cloud in that scenario. It's very easy to hide, okay, this is how that's really going to perform in the context of the big picture. Flush those out. QA is perfectly suited for that. My closing point. Remember to make plans for PNSPC. I'm on the board, so I'm vested interest in getting that. I know we've got a vetted speaker right here, but it really is a key conference for a lot of these ideas. PNSPC.org has a lot. As a matter of fact, almost all 30 years of the abstracts and testing software quality things available for reference, so please go after those. And I've got some t-shirts in the back. The first 3 people when I'm back there that express interest in going there, I'll probably share those. So, are there any questions? I know I went through that very quickly, but is there anything where you guys have had similar experiences in what you've gone after? Have some feedback or final thoughts?
You need to take some of these, or maybe you know of a place. Who here is familiar with Coding Horror, this website? All right. What about Testing Horror? I mean, you've got some really great stories and great lessons to learn from them. I hadn't thought about searching for that, but do you know of a place where there's a nice collection of these? Well, Joe Schmo thought about doing this.
You know, I've seen, ironically, there's a couple of groups on LinkedIn that have forums where they discuss, and a lot of them, they discuss this is what I'm trying to solve. And you'll get a queue of people that say, well, I've done this, or I've done that, or have you considered this? Okay. There's a lot of groups on LinkedIn that I've found are some more quality than not. But if you look through some of those.
I'm kind of looking for a curated list of really, really funny fails in software
I
quality.
don't know about funny fails, but there's Risks to the Public, which is a collection that's been going on for 30 years of various disasters, bugs, crashes, whatever. So that's one list that's well curated.
Sticky Minds is run by Better Software.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think they have that kind of a section of, okay, things not to try, or lessons learned from that. I don't know if they still maintain that, but something tells me one of the times I was looking for something like that, they had that kind of a compilation that can be searched. So that's a great question. All right. Thank you for your time, everyone.
I've got one last ask for you though.
Yes.
We do have a gift card.
Oh, there's so many to pick
Can you
from.
pick?
You can wrap off the shirts too.
That's true. I'm not allowed to. I should have enough. Who is that?
Who did we get?
Chris.
Just Chris.
Chris Biden.
Chris?
Oh.
All right. Thank you very much.
Appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it.
You can keep that for souvenirs.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the speakers. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
For hosting.